how long can you keep 100% record for? If you're Barcelona, they're on 100% at the moment, Andy. Will it last?
It almost didn't last night against Getafe, so they're now 7 out of 7. Robert Lewandowski scoring the winner in the first half. But if Borja Mayoral hadn't missed his kick in stoppage time, they would have dropped a couple of points. And of course, that would have been the twist, because Borja Mayoral came through the La Fábrica, Real Madrid, their academy there, and has been kind of round the houses to various different La Liga and continental clubs since. So they just about got it done. I suppose the other side of that is, if you're going to say Barcelona are a genuine title contender, squeezing out this sort of win against inferior opposition when you're not really firing on all cylinders is a huge part of that. And I think, given that the week that Barcelona have had, any sort of win is a good one, because of course they won 5-1 at Villarreal at the weekend. Slightly flattering, but they did play very stylishly. Having said that, Rafinha was excellent again. He got the Player of the Month award before the start of this game as well against Getafe, and he's been excellent. But of course, the real headline is the injury to Marc-Andre Szczesny, which is incredibly cruel, not just for Barcelona but for him personally. Of course, you could argue that he's been Germany's best goalkeeper for a long time. Manuel Neuer retires from Germany, and so Szczesny gets the place that he's been waiting for and perhaps deserving for quite a while. And then he gets a serious knee injury and is back to square one again, really. And he's going to be out for probably this season. But, Lars, this means an incredible twist. And Barcelona love an incredible twist, of course, because Wojciech Szczesny is coming out of retirement to keep goal for them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Barcelona, as we know, they have certain financial challenges. They can't they can't just go out and buy whoever they want. And in a time of crisis, sometimes you just go to the beach and see, is there anyone on the beach who are handy at the football? And in this case, turns out Szczesny's there, having surprisingly perhaps retired very early at the age of 34. Which is an interesting thing that we see more and more players, I think, kind of retiring a little bit early. But yeah, no, he'd quit. He was done. I believe he has a house in Spain, actually. So he might have been not that far away. He was on the beach, not that far away. And in my mind, I like to think he was actually on the beach when the call came in. I think he was. I think he was sitting on the beach chilling out when the phone rang. Now, I wonder what that is. Have we got any deliveries scheduled for today? No, it's Barcelona. That almost never happens.
He's going to wipe that smile off your face. You wait and see. Andy, what's changed about Barcelona this season? Why are they unbeatable at the moment, at least?
Well, I think Hansi Flick has been a huge part of it. And it's interesting to hear key figures from inside the dressing room, notably Pedri, who can't get enough of him and is talking about it publicly a lot, say how good he is individually with the players. Now, of course, when we look at Barcelona's summer and when they were looking for a coach, when they binned Xavi, and obviously that was a terrible bit of mismanagement, how they persuaded him to stay and then fired him. And, David Cartledge has had his words for Joan Laporta, and no one says it better than him, so I'm not going to go back over that stuff. But I think sometimes you can get the right guy sort of by accident, and they seem to have done that with Hansi Flick. Now, I think Flick is a really good example of not just someone who's a good coach, who's a good modern coach, who relates to players very well, but almost like another guy who's been through Bayern, Pep Guardiola. We have this image of coaches of they have a particular style of play, they impose it wherever, and the successful ones make it work for them. But I don't think you have to be that. And Carlo Ancelotti, who we sometimes think of as the exception to the rule, someone who despite the fact he's been enormously successful over a couple of decades now, that he's still developing, that he's still self-analytical, that he still changes depending on the situation and depending on the job itself. I think we have to give Hansi Flick a bit of credit here, because he came in and did a phenomenal job at Bayern, having not had an enormous successful coaching history behind him, or certainly not a lead coaching history behind him. Germany was a bit more difficult for reasons, many of which were beyond his control, I would argue. And then he comes into this Barcelona situation where I think what has worked well for him actually is the financial situation of the club in a sense, because to play the sort of football that Flick wants to play, and I think he has changed. Barcelona aren't playing like Bayern played if we go back 4 years at all, but he wants to edge towards a more aggressive sort of football, and we saw hints of that in the game at Villarreal at the weekend. Because they're a bit stretched, because they don't have that much money, they're doing almost what they always should have been doing, and leaning on some really good academy products and younger players. And of course, younger players, Lars, really suit the sort of football that Flick wants to play, because he likes athletic players.
Yeah, it's a good point, obviously, with Barcelona, the fact that they can't spend the money, the factors you all mentioned, and the fact that you've had injuries on top of that meant that they've had to lean pretty heavily on the academy, on guys from the second team, and so far that's worked really well. I think one thing that doesn't get mentioned enough when we talk about Flick in Barcelona, and it was a slightly surprising appointment in the summer when it happened, is the Robert Lewandowski factor here. Because obviously Barcelona is so much bigger than just one player, but like of all the moves they made when Laporta came in and went slightly off his rocker and started pulling levers left, right, and center and bringing in players and making what I think we all believe are pretty irresponsible decisions in the medium to long term for the club. One of the biggest moves was bringing in Robert Lewandowski and paying a big transfer fee and a massive contract for a guy who's well into his 30s is one of those things that's like, really? You're sure about this? And he's obviously not been bad. He has been scoring goals, but I think there's been a sense after the first 2 years that, was it really worth it? Like, his scoring record hasn't been terrible, but I don't think he's necessarily been the sort of leading light that you'd expect for the financial commitment they've made in that position. Now, some of Robert Lewandowski's best seasons of his career came under Hansi Flick at Bayern between 2019 and 2021. And I don't want to just sit here and rattle off numbers, but in the first season under Flick, he scored 34 in 31 games. Second season is when he scored 41 goals in 29 games in the Bundesliga, which is pretty wild. So like his big record-breaking season was under Hansi Flick. And you say he's changed a little bit, the methodology, sure, but it must help for Lewandowski when he's made this move. And he must be aware that as much as he's scored goals, he hasn't been the sort of world beater that they kind of need him to be for the finances they put into the deal. That the guy they appoint is someone who knows him really well and speaks a language and can kind of knows exactly which buttons to push, and someone he's been really successful under before. That has to be super helpful for Lewandowski, and Lewandowski has responded by 7 goals and 7. And he also mentioned now very specifically Lewandowski in an interview recently that he feels they're trying to get the ball to him a little bit quicker now than before, because that might have been a bit of a culture change for him moving to Spain. Some of the football, especially at Barcelona, a little bit more patient in terms of the possession game, whereas he feels now they're getting the ball to him earlier, a little bit more direct, and that suits his game more.
I think there are two halves to it as well, in that I think you're right that there is that connection between Flick and Lewandowski. I think the first half of that is Lewandowski looks fitter than he's looked in a really long time. Like he looks lean and muscly and tough and everything you want Lewandowski to be. And that little bit of extra sharpness as well as you say, that maybe slight change in how they're supplying him is really important. I think the other thing to note is they would have gladly dumped Lewandowski in the summer if they could have, because as you said, that enormous contract, they had buyer's remorse while the ink was probably still wet on the paper. So I think you look at that, you look at Rafinha, another player who they've been trying to dump since about 4 months after they've signed him. Two of the outstanding players, if not the two outstanding players for Barcelona so far this season. And I think with Flick, you do get that bit of pragmatism as well. So whatever else is going on upstairs at the club, he can cut the first team off from that. He can sort of shield them against that. And it's like, well, okay, maybe they did want to sell you. Maybe they still want to sell you. But let's think about the here and now. Look, we're here now, and let's make the most of this moment. And that's exactly what Bayern was about, wasn't it? When they won the treble there, it was about seizing the moment. It wasn't a triumph of long-term planning or anything like that.
Yeah, I've actually never thought about this before, but it's a good point, Andy. Like, just dealing with the squad and being a barrier between them and the madness upstairs and all the chaos is something Flick has done before. Like, that is very much the job description of a Bayern Munich coach as well. So this is something that didn't occur to me at the time, that's something he's got experience with. I also think if we're talking about the reasons why Barcelona have started the season so well, we absolutely have to mention Lamine Yamal, I think, who is just absurd at the age of 17. I try. Regular listeners will know I'm keen to avoid hyperbole on this show, but like you do.
Are you?
Yeah, well, except when we're talking about Norwegian people and people I don't like. But it's I really don't think there are many players in the world who are better than him right now, and not just for a teenager or for a young player. There aren't many players who are better than him. Full stop. Which is a weird thing to be able to say about a 17-year-old, but here we are. He's absolutely incredible.
Although when I ask whether Barcelona can sustain this 100% record, Andy, do we not have to consider the opposition, primarily Real Madrid, who have gone a year without being beaten in La Liga? That's absurd.
It's an amazing stat. So they completed that the day before they played Alaves on Tuesday, and 24th of September last year was the last time they lost in the Madrid derby, which is what they're facing this weekend. And if there's a moment for Barcelona to cash in on what's happening for them at the moment, I mean, they're going away to Osasuna, which is not easy, but the fact that the Madrid derby is happening this weekend, you're thinking, please take some points off each other. You can do us a massive favour here. They're 4 points clear already. And they've got a situation, especially with Real Madrid being in the place that they are. Now, the game against Alaves was a bit of a funny one because they were 3-0 up in that game. And at that point, with like going into the last 10 minutes, you're like, this is a standard like home 4-0 at the Bernabeu against opposition that they're much better than. The connection between Bellingham and Mbappe was absolutely brilliant, as you could see on the second goal. And, you thought that, okay, they're winding down. And then they concede 2 goals in under 2 minutes. And all of a sudden, they've got to tough out the last couple of moments of that game. The other thing is, Kylian Mbappe gets a thigh injury and won't be able to play in the derby at the weekend, which adds another little something to it as well. Now, this is a question for Ancelotti. Do you directly replace him in inverted commas as much as you can do with Endrick, who was really lucky not to get himself sent off for quite literally kicking a defender in the nuts in the closing stages of that game? Or does he go for the slightly more circumspect approach that he's gone for in previous derbies, where he tries to out Atletico? Either way, I think the situation is enjoyable for Barcelona. They know they can watch that. They go and win their game at Osasuna and watch that just relaxed and feel good about yourselves.